Welcome to Good Thinking on LinkedIn Live and YouTube Live. I am so glad you're here. We're starting a few minutes early, letting people come on the show. Be sure to let me know who you are in the chat and where you're from. It's so fun to see everyone from all over the world. And just for those of you who are new to the show, this is your weekly opportunity every Monday, well, most Mondays, at 9 a.m. Pacific time, here in the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. It's just a little bit of time each week, keeping it short, no more than 30 minutes, but sometimes we eke over, to give ourselves just a little bit more time to away from all the time that we're told on what to think, what to do, what to think, and to devote just a little bit of time to improving how to think. And today we're going to take all of this good thinking, so the critical thinking and the applied curiosity, and we are going to apply it to decision making. Because really, ultimately, it's great to be a good thinker. And the benefit to being a good thinker is people might think, oh, you're smart, that's great. But the real benefit is in making better decisions. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to welcome a few people onto the show. First, I always have to say hi to Stephen because I love when he always puts where he's from. So Stephen says, greetings from Scapoose's greatest suburb. So any one of you who is familiar with Portland knows that that is a hysteric location because Scappoose is like this little tiny town outside of Portland. So every week, he is required to put a new creative way of identifying the fact that, at least for now, he's in Portland. And hi, Nimish. Let me know where you're from. Glad you're here. And we're going to get started by asking a very important question that will frame today's decision-making kind of discussion. All right. And that is, we all know what we're doing right now. So if you're here right now, or if you're scrolling through social media and you happen to pop on and you go, oh, okay, but what are you not doing now? What are you not doing now? Maybe you're not walking the dog, or maybe you're not making breakfast, or maybe you're not reading a book or finishing a project for work. What are you not doing now? That being the opportunity cost of being here. So Nimish is from India. Fantastic. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So if you think about what you're not doing now, that will kind of frame how everything we decide to do means that there's an opportunity cost of what we're not doing. How many of you think, and say in the chat, please, please, please say in the chat, how many of you think that your outcomes, so the outcomes from your decision, is the best measure of your decision? So you make a decision to quit your job and start a company, or you make a decision to leave your job or ask for a promotion, or you make a decision to ask someone to go out with you, or you make a decision to get a pet. How many people think that the outcome is the best measure of that decision? Put in the chat, yes or no. Yes or no? And for those of you who are regular to the show, you'll know that for participation, there are rubber chickens that you will be awarded, one or maybe even more rubber chickens, because we really want to award participation. And everyone wants a rubber chicken in their life, more rubber chickens in our lives. All right, the next question is, how many of you think that your outcomes are the best indicator of your decision process? I mean, how many of you even evaluate your decision process? Most of us, like the vast majority of us, with all the decisions we make, from tiny ones to big ones, with all of the decisions we make, most of us really don't evaluate our decision process. We kind of find that to be true in all the research and all the literature. Most of us don't evaluate our decision process. We say, hey, was that a good decision? And we look at the outcome and we say, oh, that worked out. Or we look at the outcome and say, that didn't work out. And then we decide that it was a good or bad decision based on the outcome. But how can we improve our decision process if we only look at the outcome based on our decision? So Stephen says, no, he does not think that his outcomes are the best indicator of his decision or decision process. All right. So this is the first thing that I like to think about with the good thinking, which is to separate the decision from the decision process so you can interrogate the decision process separate from the decision itself. So let's say I decided to launch a food cart. That is my decision, but the process, all of the ingredients that went into that decision is the decision process. So when you separate the decision from the decision process, you can start improving the quality of your decisions. And here's the 3-point deal. There's kind of a 3-point deal. And that is the best way we learn is from reviewing our mistakes. Yeah, obviously. All books that are written on leadership or decision making or any of the books that you have in your bookshelf identify the public failures and the public successes. But most things don't happen that publicly. Like most things aren't Xerox, where they were the top of the world and they missed the digital camera thing, and so they got lambasted. Or Sears and Roebuck, they missed this or missed that, or Toys R Us. Most of the little decisions or big decisions really aren't that public. So we really don't have a lot of the most important learning opportunities because we only have the books that are written about the big public things. Hi, Chi. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So number one, the best way we learn is by reviewing our mistakes. But there are 2 other points to that. And one of them is kind of a problem. Does anyone know what it is? What is the problem if we only review our mistakes? So I'll give you a little hint. And the hint is the Challenger space shuttle. So the Challenger space shuttle ran, I think, like 24 tests before the launch of the tragic Challenger. And in, I think, 14 of those tests were successful and 7 were unsuccessful. So when they reviewed the unsuccessful results of the Challenger test, which is most of us will kind of look at our negative outcomes and say, oh, what went wrong? They missed the one thing that they could have found by looking at the successful tests and the elements within that were all kind of common elements. And what they realized was in all the successful tests, the temperature, external temperature, the temperature outside was above the temperature, significantly above the temperature of the day that the Challenger launched, and that affected the O-rings. So that's a little hint that your successes, although you want to celebrate them, yay, 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 you could have some really key elements to your decision process that could improve. For example, if I blindfolded myself and walked out in traffic in the middle of the night in wearing black, my favorite color, maybe nothing would happen. So I might say, wow, that was successful. Why don't I look at the fact that as long as I'm wearing black, everything should be cool if I blindfold myself and walk out in the middle of traffic. That is when you rely too much on your outcome and don't excavate successes and failures of your decision. All right. Makes sense? Where are you? Who are you? Who's here? Where are you from? Are you on YouTube? Because I see the YouTube people and I see the LinkedIn people separate from each other. All right. Number 2, humans have a mistaken tendency. So when we are looking at our outcomes, and this is why our outcomes may not be the very, very best indicator of our decision process, especially if we don't create new indicators. So it might be that our outcomes are the best, but that's just because we haven't created better ones. So the problem with the outcome also is, and this is number 2 again, that we tend to take credit for our successes and attribute our failures to external things. This is a self-serving bias. It's really, really common. So we say, wow, I had a lot of grit and I worked hard on that and that's why it worked. And I persevered and I didn't give up and that's why it worked. And we may say, the other thing didn't work because the pandemic, who could have known? Or my supply chain was disrupted by by a earthquake. Who could have known? So we attribute external forces to our failures and internal forces to our successes. And the opposite is true for other people. So when we see other people's successes, we say, wow, they got lucky, or wow, well, they made some bad decisions along the way. So this self-serving bias is something to look out for, particularly if we're going to use our outcomes as the best measure of our decision process. And the other thing, the third point, is that outcomes are really a mixture of things we put in, a mixture of luck, and a mixture of, the third ingredient is, we don't know what happened. And that is true for every little and big decision we make, from the highest stakes decision to the decision to, click on a link that you see on social media. There is, in every element of every decision is made up of three ingredients, or every outcome, is made up of three ingredients. All right, Vinay, hey, welcome from Delhi. Nice to have you here again. Welcome, good thinkers. Anyway, let me know that you're here, and let me know if you think that your outcomes are the best measure of the quality of your decision process or your decision making. Separating the decision from the decision making may give you a hint at that. Now, the other thing is, we're not really naturally wired to seek the truth, especially when it comes to ourselves. And we know from study after study that we're not as rational as we think we are. So Gandalf says, very good point, but how do you overcome the thought process of the self-serving bias? Fantastic. Okay. One of the things, and we're going to get to that. Did I set you up for that? We're going to, by the end of this very, very short, good thinking conversation, you will have several answers to that. Now, maybe some of this stuff is evolutionary. Maybe self-serving bias is evolutionary. We don't know. We don't want to really evaluate too much the decisions that we make that have a good outcome and see, wow, that's some element of luck, because we feel like, well, we can't control luck. Or maybe we say we don't want to completely beat ourselves up for every bad outcome, so we don't want to look at where we may have gone wrong. But anyway, thank you, Lynn. Thank you. Says LinkedIn learning course, critical thinking. So yes, thank you, Lynn, for mentioning that. Critical thinking for better judgment decision-making LinkedIn learning course does address this, but we're going to get a little bit into some decision-making things that were hinted at there, but we're going to go deeper. All right. So let me say this first about scientific thinking, and this may give you a hint for how you can overcome the bias. So I'm hearing a lot. How many of you have heard people say, I don't believe in science. Scientists are wrong. They say one thing, and then a few years later, it gets proven that they were wrong. How many of you, you've heard people say, well, that makes me less of a believer in science? I always think that's so weird, because science is a method. And the whole idea of the method is to create an idea or a hypothesis and then test it. And then if it stands up to the rigor of testing, it becomes a theory. But it doesn't become the truth for all eternity. That's the whole point of science, right? It becomes a theory, and then you keep poking at it. And if it keeps standing up to your tests, then it bolsters the theory. And if it doesn't, then you have to change the theory. So that's the whole process. And this is why it's weird to say, I don't believe in science, because it's like, I don't believe in a method where you're testing to see if something holds up to scrutiny. So that is a little hint. If you apply that scientific method to your own decision process, you can become, one of the things that is required is to become comfortable with the method, so that you don't feel like, I'm beating myself up, I'm not right, my decision process was horrible. It's totally fine if your decision process is horrible. But what isn't fine is that you continue to use the same process. All right, Ali, welcome. Now we've got Gandalf says, me, it's about experiment. Exactly, self-experimentation is number one. Nimish, me, absolutely. All right. So what was the last mistake you made? Now, if you think about it and you go, yeah, that's a good question, but you don't come up with a concrete answer, try to come up with a concrete answer. Just like try to come up with the first question I asked, which is, what are you not doing right now? Not what are you doing, because that's obvious. But when you start to see those kinds of things, you start to see the unseen. You start to notice. And that is one of the key elements in better decision making. You start to notice things. So what is the last bad decision you made? You may not want to put it in the chat, but if you're really brave and you're ready for self-interrogation and you're ready to kind of let it out there, you can indicate what the last bad decision you made. I'll confess to you one. I'll confess to you. Do you want me to confess to you one of the last really bad decisions I made? If you do, say yes, confess, or just put confess. If you say confess in the chat, I will confess to you the last, and it's not some little tiny decision. It was kind of a big decision. So I will confess to you the last bad, like really bad decision I think I made. All right. And I'll confess to you something else about the outcome. All right. How many of you have been in a car accident? I've been in a car accident. And it turns out that in study after study with people that are in car accidents, they almost always attribute the accident to external forces. They don't say, oh, I looked down at my phone to change the channel, or I looked at the radio for a second, and next thing I knew, I was like, oops, bumped into someone or ran a red light or whatever. These studies even show that when we're in a car accident and we're the only car, like there's no other cars involved, we still tend to attribute it to external forces. Okay, not punishing myself more, I guess. Ali says, absolutely. Okay, Stephen, of course, he says confess. And Sandali, confess, please. All right, I'm going to confess. I'm going to confess after I see how many of you have been in a car accident. How many of you? All right, here's my confession. Earlier this year, I was asked to go and speak at a very big organization, a government organization here in the US. And I was really excited because it was an opportunity to bring applied curiosity and critical thinking to this organization. This organization hadn't been exposed to my work before, so I was super, super excited. And I had had it booked for maybe like 10 months. I had booked way in advance. But as the time was coming closer, I had been reading about this virus in China and some indication that it wasn't just contained in China. And so I went to Home Depot to think maybe I should get a mask, to travel with a mask. And I usually do travel with, usually in my travel kit, I have like a little mask in case it's smoky or whatever. But the guy at Home Depot said all of the masks were sold out. It's like, what? This is long before, people were talking about masks so commonly. So I dug out my old mask in my kit. I put it in my what do you call it? The bag that I kept on with me on my carry-on. And I went to this event. Now, there were thousands of people at this event. This was in early March. And I kind of knew that this may not be the best decision. And when I got there, most everyone showed up, but one of the main keynote speakers at this event did not show up. And I thought, oh, that's weird. So I was asking, why isn't this guy, who is a best-selling author and very smart, and this organization, this is a military organization, so they take a lot of risks. So it's not like a low-risk organization where you would kind of be okay looking like you're fearful of a virus. But this guy didn't show up. And I kept asking, why didn't he show up? And the answer kept being, I know, right? I thought, no. Like, really, why didn't he show? What was his decision? What did he state as his decision for not showing up? While we were there, South by Southwest announced that they were canceling. And people were just like, that is ridiculous. But I thought to myself, is it? Did I make a good decision to travel, to speak to this group, this organization, because I really thought it would be a great opportunity. I really wanted to share my message. I really liked the mission, all of these reasons that went into my decision. So by the time I came back with my mask on, it was starting to look a little sketchy. The airports were a little more sparse, but it was still, I think, the first weekend in March. So still early. Nothing happened to me. I did not get coronavirus. I certainly didn't pass it on to anyone else. So the outcome was fine. And the speech went off swimmingly and it was lovely. But it probably wasn't the best decision process because I kind of pushed out all of the reasons. I failed to excavate. I failed to really look into disconfirming evidence. I only wanted to confirm that the idea to go was the right idea. And that is the biggest lesson, is look for disconfirming evidence. If you are decided on it, if you've made a decision, but you haven't admitted it to yourself, but you're leaning toward it, like you're going to ask someone out, or you're going to ask for a promotion at work, or you're going to send out an email to a bunch of friends saying, hey, I'm looking for work. Look for disconfirming evidence, even if you think that your decision is pretty solid, because we usually do the opposite. And for most decisions, we have this gut instinct about what we should or shouldn't do. And when we want someone's opinion, we tell them what our decision tendency is, then we give them all the information, and then we ask them what they think. Here is the key. Hold off on giving out what your decision is, or what you're thinking about, or what your tendency is. So you don't say, hey, I'm thinking about quitting my job. These are the things that are going into my decision. What do you think? You say, these are all the things that are confronting me. What do you think I should do? So if you hold back on indicating what your intention is for the decision, then you can really see, particularly if you're reaching out to someone else to help you make that decision, you can kind of see things that you might otherwise miss. If it's a friend of yours, they're going to want to support your decision. And if you tell them what you've already decided, they're going to be like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But they may come to a different conclusion if they just get all of the evidence without your decision kind of hint. All right. So Marie says car accident. Yes. Okay. When you think of your car accident, do you think, that was me being dumb, this, and this? Or do you think, wow, I couldn't have avoided it. It was icy. That's an example. And I think about a couple of car accidents that I've been in. And I know for a fact that if I really am honest about my first car accident when I was young, it was totally my fault. And I could totally avoid it. Now, I could make a lot of excuses. I can picture exactly where it was, but I can give you like 10 excuses for why it wouldn't have happened if this, and this had happened. But a better learning lesson is, what could I have done differently? What could I have foreseen? What is something that I missed? And that is kind of how I might be a little bit more honest about how to avoid that accident in the future. All right. Thanks, Gundal. Lovely example. Thank you for sharing. Well, it's kind of it's not easy because the outcome was fine. I mean, the outcome was great, but it was really a bad decision process. I don't know if it was a bad decision. Maybe, but the process was bad because I ignored things that I should have explored, that should have been ingredients that went into my decision. And if I could have separated this decision from the decision process to go and speak, I probably would have seen things that would have otherwise been missed. So if you want someone to support your decision, fine. Tell them what you're going to do or what you think you're going to do and give them all the reasons, and they'll be like, yeah, that sounds great. But if you really want to get input on your decision, if you really want to get feedback to improve your decision process by involving other people, give them the evidence first. Hold back on your inclination, what you're kind of thinking, and hold back on assumptions. You don't need to give them a lot of assumptions. Just provide the evidence and see what they come up with. That's one thing. So you're deciding to buy a motorcycle or a small car, or you're not going to buy anything. You're just going to keep riding your bike to work. And you ask an acquaintance and you say, hey, at work, these are the things that I'm thinking, or this is the evidence that I have. I am getting a lot of exercise on my bike. There's a really good price on small cars. Motorcycles would get me to places faster. All the evidence. And they might look at you like, what are you thinking? What do you think? Hold back, because then they may say, well, biking is really healthy. And then if you want to buy that motorcycle, you'll be like, yeah, but in the rain, it's really uncomfortable to have to do it. And I get sweaty. Then they're like, okay, well, I guess I agree with your decision. All right. So that's number one. I mean, that's not number one, but that's kind of the number one thing to do when you are engaging with a friend. And let's say the reverse happened. Let's take another example. And then we're going to take the reverse of that example. Let's say that you decide to invest in a friend of a friend's company and it's taking off and you've tripled your investment. Is it a good decision? Was it a good decision? You've tripled your investment. You decided to invest in a friend of a friend's company. And now you have tripled your investment. Was it a good decision? And does that also mean it was a good decision process? Tell me in the chat. Good decision process. Good decision, who knows about the decision process? Good decision, bad decision process, bad decision. Tell me what you think about the decision versus the decision process. Put it in the chat so I know what you're thinking. You'll get some rubber chickens. All right. Now, let's just say that you've invested in a friend of a friend's business and it's gone flop. You lost your investment. Good decision process. How do you know from the outcome if you had a great decision process, but you just got unlucky because who knew that a pandemic was going to hit and wipe out your friend of a friend's business? Who knows? So if you rely too heavily on the outcome, you could be missing things that could help you with your decision process. All right. So what can you do? Obviously, you can hold off if you're getting a friend, you can hold off on telling them what you want to do. That's one thing. And another thing is you can do outcome excavation. And I'm going to borrow something from this guy who is kind of the founder of, sociology. He's like the grandfather of sociology. And he had this idea. I think it's called, his idea initially was used for some other things, but it was called kudos. And it was used in a book called Thinking in Bets, which I really, really like. It was written by Annie Duke. She was a top level poker player. And she wrote a great book. I recommend it, called Thinking in Bets. And she uses this kudos from, his name is Schlocknick. And like I said, the founding father of sociology. And kudos, C-U-D-O-S, kudos is an acronym. And so we're going to get into really quickly as we wrap up how to use kudos so that you don't have to rely too heavily on your outcome to improve your decision process. Okay, outcome is good, process not so sure. How he judged? Absolutely. That's the point. If you have a good outcome, but you have no process for judging your decision, you could miss things like the Space Shuttle Challenger or many of these things where the decision is bad, the outcome is bad. You don't even look at the decision process or the outcome because you say, we couldn't have known. Or the decision is good and you go, yay, we were so smart. We're so great. We just kept persevering. All right, kudos. You ready? All right. So Marie says, I don't know. It makes me think of more questions. Initially, yes, because you tripled your money, but that's only a point in time. Yes. And I'm going to give a rubber chicken. This is a rubber chicken for Marie because she hinted at something. More questions. Do you have enough information? What information are we missing? There's a famous example of Sherlock Holmes where he solves this mystery, this murder mystery. And what was missing was when supposedly, I'm simplifying it, majorly simplifying it, but the thing that was missing was that the dog didn't bark when the perpetrator went in because clearly the dog was familiar with the perpetrator. That was like one of the key things. So sometimes in decision science, people talk about what is the non-barking dog in the room? Like, what is the non-barking dog in the room? So that's about asking more questions. Absolutely. All right, kudos. Let's wrap this up with getting kudos. We're going to run a few minutes over time, but I'm going to go quickly. C for kudos stands for communism. Okay, not the political theory, but the idea of sharing. In this case, it has to do with a common sharing of all the evidence. And we hinted at this before, sharing all the evidence, not holding back evidence that might disconfirm what you want, and being completely egalitarian about all of the evidence, sharing all the information, being transparent and leaving out no details. So think communism. I know people go, ooh, communism, or yay, communism. Not the political theory, but the idea of sharing. U stands for universalism. This means using the same standards for evaluating all information. And here you need to look out for biases. So, she said that, but she's not an engineer. We're not going to look at her information. Or she's the boss, so we really need to value her information higher than the administrative assistant because she's the boss and she's just the administrative assistant, like that. So universalism means using the same standards for evaluating all the information. Does that make sense? How many think kudos so far? Communism, sharing all the information, then not being biased about it, sharing all the information regardless of who provides it or where it comes from. Obviously, with that one, you want to make sure that your evidence is coming from a reliable source, but you know what I mean. All right, D stands for disinterestedness. And, a lot of people, clearly a lot of people know, but a lot of people, and sometimes I even make the mistake of the difference between uninterested, like boring, don't care, and disinterested, meaning not biased, not prejudged. So you want your judge, like if you're going up for trial and you're being accused of something that you have not done, you want a disinterested judge, not an uninterested judge, not a judge who just cannot wait to get to lunch because this is so boring. This is my fifth trial like this, and my fifth trial like this morning. You want a disinterested judge, one that comes with no bias. So D stands for disinterested. So here's where you want to share, where you want to share the decision maybe before you share the outcome. So if the decision has already been made, you want to share the decision before you share the outcome so that you can evaluate the decision and the decision process. And OS stands for organized skepticism. I like to think of this as reflective skepticism. How many of you think that skepticism can kind of be a bad thing? Like if you're skeptical, you're questioning something, it just means that you don't believe in it enough. How many of you think that that can be a bad thing? Is skepticism primarily a bad thing or primarily a good thing? Good thing, thumbs up. Bad thing, thumbs down. What do you think? All right. In this case, organized skepticism means that all ideas must be tested and subjected to rigorous scrutiny and community scrutiny. Now, here is where a critical thinking mindset if you don't have your critical thinking mindset kind of in place, it can get in the way. Skeptics are frustrating, but not bad, Marie says. Yes, they can be frustrating, particularly when they disagree with what you think to be true. But they also are great in bringing up disconfirming evidence, which is necessary for a good decision process. So last thing with the organized skepticism is you got to bring the ability to have your beliefs challenged. And one thing I think that is really important and a good tool that might help, especially in this age of information overload, is to separate the person from the idea so that you can interrogate the idea without looking too heavily initially at the identity of the person. And that allows for this organized skepticism. How many of you know where the term devil's advocate comes from? Skepticism is the basis of science, and it says, yes, rubber chickens. Yes, 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 it is. Without skepticism, there is no scientific method. How many of you know where the term devil's advocate, we're going to end with this, but know where the term devil's advocate comes from? Do you know where the term devil's advocate comes from? Maybe it's something a lot of people know. I didn't really know this. Devil's advocate. So Chi says she thinks skepticism is a good thing. Agreed. Devil's advocate comes from the Catholic Church. So what would happen was when someone during the canonization process, so during the time that they were evaluating the decision to make someone a saint, they would bring someone in who could make the case for not making this person a saint. So they would bring in all the reasons that this person should not be made a saint. And that person was called a devil's advocate. So if you're making a group decision, not only do you need to prepare the group to separating the person from the idea, to create a value in the process of skepticism, even self-directed skepticism, but also to have the role assigned, maybe to one or two people, to be an actual devil's advocate so that they don't get called, "Hell, you're just a skeptic. You're just a negative Nelly." They're like, "No, that's my job. I'm the devil's advocate." Oh, and guess what? Next time you're going to be the devil's advocate. So hopefully we're 5 minutes over. So I'm going to wrap it up. Have a great week. Let me know really quickly before we wrap up. Do you like good thinking? Is it a good time on Mondays? Are you tuning in on LinkedIn? If you want to get notifications, because we may be adding a few more cool things, be sure to subscribe. It's just Becky Saltzman, my YouTube channel, and smash that button to subscribe. And then you can get notification when we're going live for critical thinking, applied curiosity, and good thinking framework information to help you make decisions at work and in every aspect of your life. And also we will be providing for subscribers, we're going to be having some promo codes for a really cool thing that we're launching next year called the High Stakes Decision Making Online Training and Coaching Program. Initially, this was going to be only a program for the corporate world, for kind of high corporate structure program. But now when you really look at the number of people that are independent contractors, entrepreneurs, or people that are kind of re-upskilling, kind of looking for new opportunities, we're going to open this up. We're going to have a whole cohort for individuals that are kind of outside the corporate structure. So if you're interested in those promo codes, definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're kind of sexing it up a bit too. All right. Thank you. This time it's great for Ireland. Fiona, great. Thank you. Marie, assigning the devil's advocate is a pretty interesting concept. Yes. Bring the devil's advocate to your decision-making process and join Good Thinking Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Thanks. Have a great week. Thanks, good thinkers.